In 1984, as the city of Los Angeles thrived with its bustling energy, no one could have predicted that a shadow of death was beginning to creep through the night. A predator with no specific type of victim, no consistent method of killing, and no clear pattern for the police to follow. They called him the Night Stalker. As darkness fell, families in Los Angeles no longer felt safe in their own homes. He didn't discriminate by age, gender, or background. From elderly couples, women living alone, to young children, anyone could become his target. He struck from the shadows, breaking into homes, torturing victims, murdering, raping, and leaving behind satanic symbols. No one could predict where he would strike next. A family sleeping peacefully, an elderly couple living quietly, or a young woman returning home late from work. Anyone could become the Night Stalker's next victim. The first attack occurred on June 28, 1984, but it wasn't until March 1985 that fear truly gripped all of Los Angeles. The police had no leads, the media relentlessly reported on the horror, and residents lived in terror every night. He wasn't just a killer, he was a nightmare come to life. Unlike other serial killers who followed a specific pattern, the Night Stalker acted randomly. He used knives, guns, hammers, chains, whatever he could turn into a weapon. He left no fingerprints, followed no recognizable routine, and after each crime, he vanished like a ghost. For over a year, his brutal murders continued, and the police had no clear leads on his identity. Families in Los Angeles locked their doors tighter, bought guns for protection, and lived in fear as soon as the sun went down. The police were desperate. The media applied pressure, and the Night Stalker kept hunting in the shadows. But then, one small mistake changed everything. During the investigation, forensic experts discovered a strange commonality among the crime scenes. At multiple crime scenes, police collected matching shoe prints. They belonged to a size 11.5 Avia sneaker, a brand that was not widely available at the time. When checking sales records, police found that only a few pairs of this specific Avia model had been sold in Los Angeles. This was the first forensic clue police obtained. It proved that the same perpetrator was responsible for these crimes. However, a shoe print alone was not enough to determine his identity. In July 1985, a critical attack occurred. The Night Stalker broke into the home of Whitney Bennett, a 16-year-old girl, while she was fast asleep. He repeatedly struck her head with a metal rod, causing severe injuries. But just as he attempted to strangle her, something bizarre happened. The strangulation cord suddenly snapped. Panicked, he fled the scene without finishing the murder as he had in previous cases. Whitney miraculously survived, and upon regaining consciousness in the hospital, she provided the police with a description of her attacker. For the first time, there was a witness who had seen the Night Stalker's face. She described him as a thin man with long hair, dark piercing eyes filled with cruelty, and an unbearably foul breath. However, police still lacked a definitive identification. They needed stronger evidence to directly link him to the crimes. August 6, 1985, just 1 month after Whitney Bennett miraculously survived, the Night Stalker struck again. This time, he brutally murdered Maxon Pan and his wife, then fled the scene in an orange Toyota. What he didn't expect was that a neighbor had seen the car and written down the license plate number. This was the turning point of the case. Police quickly checked the vehicle registration system, only to discover that the orange Toyota had been reported stolen. While using the stolen car, he accidentally left a fingerprint on the rearview mirror. Investigators ran the fingerprint through the criminal database, and within moments, a name appeared on the screen: Richard Ramirez. He had a prior arrest record for theft, meaning his fingerprints were already in the system. After more than a year of terrorizing the city, police finally had the true identity of the Night Stalker. Immediately, authorities held a press conference revealing Richard Ramirez's name and face to the entire nation. Television broadcasts issued urgent warnings. We now know the name of the Night Stalker. He is Richard Ramirez. If anyone sees him, call the police immediately. All of America watched as the hunt for the serial killer began. August 28, 1985, Los Angeles police officially identified the Night Stalker after matching the fingerprint from the stolen orange Toyota. His name was Richard Ramirez. For the first time, Los Angeles saw the true face of the monster in the shadows. But one critical question remained. Where was Ramirez? As soon as authorities confirmed his identity, police held an urgent press conference. On every TV channel, Richard Ramirez's image flashed across the screen with a bold red warning. Dangerous. This man is wanted by police. The Los Angeles Police Department, the FBI, and other law enforcement agencies issued a nationwide manhunt for the Night Stalker. Officials warned the public, if you see Richard Ramirez, call the police immediately. He is considered extremely dangerous and may continue to kill. For the first time, the killer was no longer hiding in the shadows. He was being hunted by all of America. But at this moment, Richard Ramirez still had no idea his identity had been exposed. He continued living as if nothing had changed, unaware that every eye in the country was now looking for him. Just before police publicly released his name, Ramirez left Los Angeles and headed south to Arizona by bus. He stopped in Tucson, possibly to visit a relative. But when he failed to find them, he made a fateful decision. He would return to Los Angeles on August 31st, 1985. At this point, Ramirez still didn't know that his face was plastered on every newspaper and TV screen. He stepped onto a Greyhound bus, returning to the city where he had once spread terror. But this time, Los Angeles was ready for him. He walked into a convenience store, completely unaware of what was waiting for him. But as soon as he approached the newspaper stand, a wave of shock hit him. On the front page of every newspaper was his own face, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, the most wanted killer in America. Panic set in. Ramirez looked around and realized everyone in the store was staring at him. A man quietly slipped out of the store and whispered to someone outside, "That's him! That's the Night Stalker!" Within minutes, the entire neighborhood knew Richard Ramirez was there. Chaos erupted. "The Night Stalker! He's here!" Ramirez fled in a panic, but he didn't get far. He ran down the street trying to steal a bicycle, but a man stopped him. He ran further, attempting to carjack a vehicle, but the owner fought back. As he kept running, more people started chasing him. The further he ran, the larger the crowd grew. Richard Ramirez was no longer the hunter. He had become the prey. One man grabbed a metal pipe and struck Ramirez in the head, knocking him to the ground. By the time police arrived, Ramirez was already lying on the pavement surrounded by an angry crowd. Bleeding and cuffed on the spot, Ramirez remained silent. The Night Stalker had finally been captured, not by police, but by the very people he had once terrorized. After more than a year of pure horror, the Night Stalker was no more. On August 31st, 1985, the Night Stalker was captured, but justice had yet to be fully served. The trial of Richard Ramirez was not only one of the most expensive in U.S. history, but it also lasted for over 4 years before concluding with a shocking verdict. Ramirez showed no fear, no remorse. He even turned the trial into a twisted spectacle for the public. What happened inside the courtroom and what sentence awaited him? On July 22, 1988, the trial officially began. From the very first day, Richard Ramirez sent shivers down the spines of everyone in the courtroom. He walked in with a smirk, raised his hand in a satanic gesture, and revealed a pentagram on his palm. He stared directly at the jury and declared, "Hail Satan!" The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Ramirez showed no fear, no regret. He even laughed throughout the trial, as if he was enjoying every second of it. But the most shocking part wasn't his behavior. It was what the police and prosecutors were about to present. Throughout more than a year, Richard Ramirez had committed at least 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and over 14 burglaries. Prosecutor Gil Garcetti described him as a monster without humanity. The court reviewed each crime, heard testimonies from survivors, and examined horrific crime scene photos. Ramirez's fingerprints on the stolen orange Toyota were irrefutable evidence. The Avia sneaker prints found at crime scenes matched his exact shoe size. Eyewitnesses and survivors gave precise descriptions of his face. This evidence was enough to convict Richard Ramirez, but he remained unfazed. He smirked as he listened to testimonies about his brutal murders. He stared at the victims' families, as if trying to intimidate them right there in the courtroom. He turned the trial into his own sick performance. His defense attorneys argued that Ramirez had mental health issues, claiming that he was not mentally fit to be held responsible for his crimes. But prosecutor Garcetti immediately shut down that argument. Richard Ramirez is not insane. He knew exactly what he was doing. He killed because he enjoyed it. He believed Satan had chosen him. The prosecution demanded the death penalty. The jury needed time to determine his fate. The trial dragged on for over 4 years, becoming one of the longest and most expensive trials in U.S. legal history. On November 7, 1989, the jury finally delivered the final verdict. Richard Ramirez was sentenced to 19 death sentences, one of the harshest death penalties in U.S. history. But instead of fear, Ramirez smiled, looked straight at the prosecutor and jury, and said, "I have no regrets. I am not afraid. I'll see you all in hell." America was outraged. The victims' families broke down in tears. But in the end, justice had prevailed. Richard Ramirez was escorted out of the courtroom, and he would never harm anyone again. On November 7, 1989, Richard Ramirez was sentenced to 19 death sentences, but justice did not come as swiftly as people had hoped. Despite receiving the death penalty, Richard Ramirez was not executed immediately. The American legal system allows death row inmates to appeal their sentences, and with a complex case like the Night Stalkers, Ramirez would remain alive for many more years in prison, awaiting his final fate. After being transferred to San Quentin State Prison, Ramirez showed no remorse or fear. Instead, he became infamous within the criminal world, turning into one of the most terrifying inmates in California's prison system. He received hundreds of letters from admirers, especially women. Some professed their love for him, writing letters expressing admiration for his courage. Some even sent him nude photos. One of his most devoted admirers was Doreen Lyoy, a journalist. In 1996, she married Richard Ramirez inside the prison. Yes, a serial killer got married behind bars. Doreen insisted that Ramirez was innocent, claiming he was misunderstood and that she loved him with all her heart. The event shocked the entire nation, but the most disturbing part was that Ramirez never changed. He remained a devoted Satanist, mocked his victims, and believed he would live forever. In a 1993 interview, when asked about death, Ramirez smirked and said, "I don't care. Death has always been part of the game." He didn't fear death, he welcomed it. The legal delays, why wasn't Ramirez executed immediately? Many believe that being sentenced to death means an immediate execution. But in reality, it's not that simple. Richard Ramirez continued filing appeals. The U.S. justice system requires all death sentences to undergo multiple reviews, a process that can take decades. In 2006, the California Supreme Court rejected Ramirez's final appeal. He was placed on death row awaiting execution, but then something unexpected happened. On June 7, 2013, Richard Ramirez was found dead in his prison cell. Cause of death, complications from lymphoma. He died before he could be executed, a death unworthy of the horrors he inflicted. Many were outraged that he had escaped the punishment he truly deserved. The victims' families couldn't believe that after nearly 30 years, Ramirez had died a natural death. One of the prosecutors who once fought to convict him said, "Justice should have come sooner. Richard Ramirez should have been executed years ago." After nearly 3 decades behind bars, the Night Stalker was finally gone, but his crimes will forever haunt America. The Night Stalker is dead, but the terror he unleashed still lingers. And the biggest question remains, if Ramirez hadn't died of illness, would he have ever been executed, or would he have lived decades longer on death row? No matter what, America will never forget the nightmare that the Night Stalker brought upon the nation. What do you think about this case? Was justice truly served? Leave a comment and let others know your thoughts.